Boom. We're live, ladies and gentlemen. Just wanted to do a quick update, go over some ideas in the crypto sector. We're going to start with Bitcoin. That's right. And we're going to make it a pretty short little live video this evening. I just wanted to share something here that I was watching. You too, you'll like this one for the private bear den. I tried to record this earlier, but anyways, here it is. Tried to publish it on TradingView and it didn't work. So I wanted to go over this moment. So yesterday we talked about this rising wedge, and I've talked about my new understanding of supply line falls and how the creek follows that supply line effectively, right? So it's quite a hard angle for the supply line and the creek quite often, and it moves very, very tight along the top. To get a break is actually quite difficult. So here, see the supply line, and where it crossed here, you saw the supply line come up and then come back down. So you actually need to be able to hold back above this underlying supply line effectively. So right now, Bitcoin is, what's fun about this is that we pointed out yesterday the rising wedge, which is usually a bearish pattern. And then again, remember we have a much larger macro scale that we're more interested in, but the people get caught up in the minutia. You know, I talk about being ultimately bullish throughout all of this effectively. Aside from this moment here, we talked, and again, I pointed out that it didn't look like it was distribution, but it could be. You know, we'll know. But more importantly, it's the supply characteristics and this supply line, I think, is a good way to see it. So this rising wedge here, these are just defined supply lines effectively, right? So what you're watching is a supply characteristic move between kind of a set group of parameters on the buy and sell side. And we think about Compman in his operations of buying and selling. So here, I just want to use this micro story to kind of share something I felt was valuable. Number one, you should definitely watch the video I did today about price versus value. I think you'll clarify my sentiments in general. But here, this is a technical study. So we have a rising wedge, which we don't normally use. We do not normally use these smaller intermediary patterns because they can be very deceiving. If you see a rising wedge and you think, well, that's bearish, yes, maybe for a few days, but ultimately, where are we in this story, right? So on the 6 hour, this kind of rising wedge and then now what's become a falling wedge is almost unimportant. So if we go back to, let's go back to the 45-minute here. Okay, yeah, so here back to the 45-minute. Now on the supply line that's forming on the way down, we are in what's known as a falling wedge. So rising wedge is bearish, falling wedge is bullish, right? So you go from a bearish to a bullish signal instantaneously. And we talked about this in yesterday's video about like kind of the ideal market cycle of accumulation and distribution. And for those of you that know me, you will know that I love kind of like the philosophy of more than like the rigid technicals of some of this. We use the technicals to kind of really refine this story. But right now with Bitcoin, we've been running into this supply line into a falling wedge. These will often break bullish, right? So Mewtwo, you were going over this in your with your PNF charts in the private group. I like this. So again, I like these supply lines. I've been using them more and more frequently. So let's look at SRM, and then we're going to take a look at Ethereum to kind of finalize. So with SRM here, it's kind of a mess, right? Like it's a mess of lines. And normally I don't ever suggest doing stuff like this. But what I'm doing is I'm testing a kind of like not a theory, but something I want a visual representation for, which is supply lines. So here in Serum, you know, we're in our first SOS. It's pretty easy to think that this is the primary support and this is a buying climax, and that we're watching a larger trading range take place, especially because we know how big the trading range was for Serum. But more importantly, these supply lines, I think, are a fun little trick and tool. On the smaller time frames, they're not as valuable, primarily speaking, like when we were going over Bitcoin in the much larger time frames. Again, most of you have been with us for a long time. You'll remember that at the beginning of August, September, when we were watching the bull market, we were using regression lines to kind of chart out where until where we were at until we hit blue sky, and that's where Ethereum is. Ethereum's up in that blue sky moment. But with Serum on these smaller time frames, what I like about it is that it gives me practice to remember a few key things. Number one is that there's always, and the Bollinger Bands kind of represent this too, there's always a trail above and below that's running along the supply line here, right? So effectively, and there are things you can use to chart these out that will automatically do it, right? I like personally drawing things in. You can't spell chart without art. So here I'm going to use two of these indicators. Now, see how there's this green band along the outside of the price signature here, and then a much bigger Bollinger Band below. So our movement above the price signature here for Serum was very bullish, especially when we closed down into it and then exploded above, moved into it and out, and then now we're right back almost in the center of the Bollinger Band. It will probably consolidate here, and that's why I was assuming that this is actually a much larger trading range. But the point of this is all these different like colorful indicators can really be simplified often, and even though this looks like a complex frigging mess of ideas here, it's actually showing me something very simple. Just where's the supply line on kind of a hard angled basis, right? And that's, you can do it with indicators like Bollinger Bands by cutting them across, but I like drawing them, and look how ridiculous this looks now. It's super psychedelic, right? But there's a reason for it. There's a reason for this this price action, and my interest in it right now is because what we're doing is we're studying supply and demand characteristics, right? So the supply and demand characteristic is really of a huge importance when we're using these charts. So even though we clean it up, we go out to the 6 hour, we recognize, okay, Serum has been in an accumulation zone for quite some time. We had almost what appears to be a beautiful inverse head and shoulders for the most part, although you could even match it out as a triple bottom. Very, very similar signature in the accumulation ranges, but nonetheless, either a triple bottom or an inverse head and shoulders, however you'd like to look at it. And then we've moved up into our SOS and our backup phase. So again, for those of you, most of you will have studied at this point and kind of generally understand the references that I'm making. I'm way too boring for people to stick around and not actually do the homework. So here, now that we're in the SOS and the kind of backup phase, really what we're doing is measuring the finality of a cycle here before the Serum goes probably a little ballistic. It's got a $550 million market cap. It's a decentralized index created by FTX, basically speaking. To simplify, that's not exactly the truth, but close enough. And I like these investments in suites of products by these companies that have deep moats of knowledge, revenue, and traditional stock buyback systems already built into their kind of functioning liquidity token for their launchpad. Seems brilliant to me. Anyways, nonetheless, what I want to do here again is make a larger scale conjecture of two things: fundamentals and technicals, right? So from a fundamental point of view, Serum has a lot of good things going on. So I can rely, being in this position pretty heavily, for a longer duration of time than like some pump and dump topic, which could last less than 24 hours, right? So a lot of people get upset. They're like, oh, what's a shit coin? They have all sorts of names for something, but there's serious value in the production of these new types of market makers and market players. And anyways, the point of this, here we are in our backup phase. We get to write this in now. It always feels good to do that because it means we're entering into a bullish case on a higher level for Serum, and knowing all those bullish fundamentals, seeing the bullish technicals line up, we're using these supply line characteristics to kind of really measure something on the shorter time frame to see how well it plays out on these longer time frames. Because remember, the whole time you're going through an accumulation range, you've got what's called the creek running above, and you actually have what's called breaking the ice below. So we've talked about this a few times, that you can, and this is what a lot of people get wrong, why phase C for Bitcoin is likely being invalidated almost entirely for the people who were claiming it was distribution, is because it's not just a story of price signature, it's a story of supply signature as well. And the creek represents a break above or below the supply signature effectively on a much kind of broader basis. So even though these lines are drawn in, again, there are other ways to factor in the way we look at these. And this is by using our Bollinger Bands and a mix of an Ichimoku cloud effectively. And here we can see that same story not drawn out by hand. Now, the reason I think it's important to kind of draw it out by hand and understand it first is because you want to understand what it is more than what it does. Because if you understand what it is, it makes sense on how you use it. So here on the 4-hour chart, we actually haven't been able to get out of this band yet. There's going to be a moment when we leave this band on the 4-hour and Serum becomes explosive, right? As we get into the smaller time frames, we can actually see that that's more and more likely. And that's what we see by using these supply range falls on like the 1-hour time frame. Here you're going to see the I guess much smoother format. Okay, here's the previous sections. Here's basically your 4-hour band. And then this vague green line above it is like your creek effectively, and below it is like the ice. So every time we break above or below these inner bands here, and this exterior band again is more important for the macro time frame. Right, so as we go back into the middle of this band, it's very likely that we come back to test this area, the smaller area of the band as well. Although we are very bullish for Serum here too, you'll know. I will have you note. So I'm not changing my thoughts on Serum. I just wanted to kind of show why some of the charts look messy. When I draw them up, there's a lot going on. It's pretty simple. I'm sure it looks a lot more complex than it needs to be. I probably even make it sound more complex than it needs to be as well. But I think there's a value to the I guess the technical process of going through and understanding some of this stuff, because it's very easy to get drawn into wanting to become like the best technical trader. And really, that's not what I'm doing here. I'm not trying to make a trade and get out and jump into another trade and then get out. And I'm just trying to understand market dynamics while I'm doing this, because I want to know when the market starts and ends. That's basically it. I want to know when market cycles start and end. That's it. All this other smaller intermediary study is to perfect that thesis effectively, right? Because it gives me a huge amount of insight to know, hey, we're at the beginning or we're near the end of this market cycle. Dogecoin up at 60 cents represents to me something amazing. I went over videoed earlier, but I also think it represents the likelihood that we are kind of right near and into the face melting area and when the market cycle kind of ends here. Let's see, back to Ethereum. We are witnessing the start of a new trading range. On the 1 hour, it's still the very beginning of a trading range. If we go out here, we could see a larger shakeout. Bitcoin, on the other hand here, and I'll go back to this idea of where I'm watching on the supply lines, it's breaking out of its falling wedge right now, right? So ultimately this bullish supply line characteristic was a breakout moment on the smaller time frame. This is where I think Bitcoin now goes bullish, right? So I made a bullish video yesterday while we were going down, and people were like, so you're making a bullish video, the price is going down. I was like, yes, I know. That's the point. We're in a rising wedge. We're now headed into a falling wedge. We're retesting this $54,000 area, which seems to be key, and moving outwards. Did I say we could come lower? Yes, there's a very clear chance we could have came lower in this falling wedge, all the way back down to the supply line, kind of like butted up area here. And again, you know, this technical stuff is almost unimportant. It's such a small moment in the history of where we normally take into account, which is, again, just the beginning and the end of this market cycle. Look how irrelevant that becomes. Yet, I don't think the study is irrelevant. I think that there's a lot of valuable insight that can be gained from understanding how market cycles work, how CompMan plays, how you would play, and how you play when you've got a lot of money, effectively. Anyways, hopefully this is helpful. I do suspect we're going to jump back above into the $62,000 range, maybe touch up into 68, 67, maybe even build a kind of a backup phase that's right around the top of the channel. Effectively, like once we start to close above the $60,000 area, it's looking very bullish for Bitcoin. could bode well for Ethereum here too. It's too early in the trading cycle to think that this is distribution, although it does definitely look like a hyperbolic top to some degree. This is generally right off the bat, this signals to me like at least a temporary distributional moment where we could come down to, let's say, 2600 as the new trading range that it would form. And we've seen these before too, where the trading range just gets basically pushed up to another sector, right? So we've seen, if you go back, you study everything we've gone over, one trading range, another trading range, and basically another trading range here, right? And each of these times we've actually been getting a slight higher incline to some degree of the kind of intermediary shape. And again, you know, like I said, these don't have to be drawn in. There are ways to look at it. And again, it's valuable, but I think it's more important than using the indicators just to understand what it does, because you don't need the indicator. Like you can visually, mentally see it. It takes but 30 seconds to basically grab the brush and go, you go, okay, yeah, there it is. Like here, it's just like this. Oh, look, there it is, right? There's the blue that I'm looking for. So here again, let's maybe actually clean that. That's fine. Ignore the ups and downs stuff. It's kind of not really worth paying attention to. But here we see Ethereum. See how once we started to move in towards and then start to really clearly close above the band and just stayed above the band here. This is usually where we come down, and notice how the band is right at our primary support here on the 6 hour too. So it's very likely we come down for a big swing in Ethereum. It'll be nice to see Bitcoin go up in that big swing down, and probably a lot of our other plays like SRM, Avalanche, etc. find more breath. Well, kind of Ethereum would take a little bit of a breather. A bunch of people with profits from Ethereum would reinvest in their favorite DeFi projects. Anyways, all that fun stuff. So that's where I think we are. Hopefully you guys enjoyed tonight's episode. I just wanted to kind of go over some of what I've been thinking, and you know, I'm always learning and growing too. There's no like, oh, I've figured this out. I don't know exactly what's happening. But these are the key indicators. So notice again on the 6 hour, we can't even really tell that there's anything happening with Ethereum, and that's where we usually like to run our trading ranges. So it's very likely that what we're seeing on the 45-minute for Ethereum is a distributional pattern. I mean, I can't see it right off the bat yet. It's too small of a time frame to say for sure, but this to me is usually what a kind of a hypodermic top looks like. Some people call it a head and shoulders. The hypodermic top is usually a little bit higher, but remember, we're only on the 45-minute chart, so this is not the end of like the market cycle. This is just likely the end of this kind of first nice uptick that we had in Ethereum in a while, and this is where we get into face screamy mode. So I'm not particularly interested in like closing a position here. Even if it does come down, we're just judging by where we are. This last accumulation moment could be very, very, very fast, and we could rip significantly higher afterwards. And the rest of the market could be on its way to doing that. So I don't want to miss that. Again, I'm ultimately very bullish for the few of these things, but just for like educational sake, again, you know, what we're witnessing when we go through a horizontal trading range, the potential of what most pattern recognition people do get right is that, yeah, here's on the smaller time frame, this is likely temporary distributional pattern, likely to the $2,700 area, to create, again, if you're looking at the macro story, what will become a much larger trading range. Again, very similar, and all the characteristics for these things show up when you go to the larger time frames and you incorporate exactly the thing I was trying to share my sentiments about before, which is the supply, the creek, and the ice effectively. And here you can see on the 6 hour time frame, the ice of Ethereum is way back down here at around 2,800. So that's probably where we're headed, because that little 45-minute moment looks like a temporary distributional pattern. So keep that in mind. And again, it'll be fun to see if Bitcoin goes up during this. It's kind of my key conjecture right now. And as Bitcoin is moving through that what was what I believe to be a falling supply line, and closing above it now, this will be nice to see. probably get a little something like this, close above it, and stay within the $58,000 area for a moment. And again, remember that those two green lines that we just jumped in between to show where we would hopefully show a bit more time consolidating in this $56,000 area. This is the top of our trading range from our buying climax previously. So this would make a lot of sense, and it's running right through the middle, which is crazy because this is a hyper bullish pattern for those of you who have been studying. Remember, rising gradient bottoms are a bullish pattern. This is why people often get these distributional patterns wrong as well, is because they can be very deceiving if you don't know how to study the supply characteristics. Anyways, thank you guys all for joining us this evening. Leave us a thumbs up if you like this content. I will take a look at a few of your guys' thoughts and questions. I'm not going to take a look at any other charts tonight. I'm just going to rant. So if you guys have asked questions that I can riff or rant on, I will go back and play with that. Nice. It's good to see everyone. Thank you guys. Love you guys as well. So I'm just catching up with all your guys' comments. Okay, great. What's your portfolio like right now? Oh, great. I feel great. Everything's fantastic. My main focus now is to find ice baths and like, let's say Muay Thai and CrossFit. That's right. So that's why I'm moving to Bali technically. So my portfolio is great. Now it's just about like, normal life shit. Grayscale is buying everything. Yes. Did you look at DOT? No, I'm not looking at anything else inside of this. Best way to accept crypto for your businesses? Tell your clients that you accept crypto. It's a pretty easy one. Awesome. Well, just keep it brief. I'm glad you guys enjoyed the pineapple video today. It was a lot of fun for me. Oh, you know what I could do is remember to follow us on the social media accounts down below. I can play a little bit of guitar because you guys always like it when I end the streams with a little bit of music. Let's see here. I kind of made it sound a little better, I think. I know you guys always appreciate this. So what was I was playing earlier or something I like. Yeah. Anyways, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed that. A little bit of, I don't know, some Arabia or something. Just a little out of tune, but love you, Bear family. We'll see you guys in the private group. Thank you all for supporting the Arcane Bear. For those of you that are asking if I'm selling my house, no, I will never sell my property. I love my trees. I'm not going to sell my trees. I like my trees. I'll keep them for the rest of my freaking life. Thank you very much. There's no need to sell assets. Just accumulate them. Let's deal with the Arcane Bear. Thank you guys all for joining us this evening. You guys are fantastic, and we'll see you again on the next episode.